Welcome to the I Get It Show, a creatively fun discussion focused on the pursuit of meaningful daily life. With a wide variety of topics, insights through celebrations, influencer interviews, and everyday life journey interactions. Inspiring you to pursue passionate happiness and discovering the simple aha moments in life that serve to power the journey of purpose. And now your hosts for the I Get It Show, Jeff Armour and Lindsay Lott.
Hey guys, welcome to the I Get It Show. I'm Lindsay Lott here with Jeff Armour. Of course, Sean and B Wise. What's up?
Wow, you went full on Jeff Armour. I
did.
It. Right.
I didn't even realize it, but I got
Right.
I really did.
Lindsay is all about the formalities today.
Well,
it's Mr.
Throwing
Armour
me off
to
with
you.
your Christine coffee mug over there. So I don't really know.
Yeah, please don't tell whoever Christine is that I took her coffee this
I won't.
morning. Yeah, that would be awkward.
And it's quite ironic, actually, that our topic today is all about expectations, and we're just
jeez.
sitting here talking about how we're all disappointed and let down.
Right. You know, it goes back to, and if you haven't listened to one of our previous shows, you can go back and search for it on our podcast channels. It's People Suck, and we can't live without them. So you might want to check that out because we've experienced some suckage recently. But that's all right. That's okay. We are full of opportunities to discuss our great topic. I'm excited about this topic today because I think it fits every single human being on Earth, no matter their age, no matter where they live, no matter their relationship status. Like, this is a thing, right? So
it's a thing. And I was talking to my mama last night at my son's basketball game, and she asked, "What is your topic for your podcast tomorrow?" And I said, "Expectations." And she said, "Oh, wow, you could just talk for hours about that." Yeah. And I said, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, because I have like a one-liner, and it's like,
is that right?
Expectations don't have any.
And that's the show. And my response to that is, "You're a liar."
I'm a liar for saying that.
Right.
Oh, I'm just saying, if you don't want to be disappointed, sometimes it's like best not to have expectations, right?
Exactly. And I think that is one way to look at it. So I appreciate
it's the jaded and callous way to look at it.
This is the cynical part of
yes.
of our girl today.
Exactly.
All right, Lindsay the cynic. We'll meet Lindsay the haphazardly positive influencer a little later in the program.
She'll be back.
Right, she'll be back.
She'll be back.
Yeah. And I'm sure that already, we're only just, 2 or 3 minutes into the show, I'm sure that our moderator, B Wise, is already making notes on your comments. So I'm excited about that. Can't wait to check in with him later.
Of course.
I like to set up in the beginning of our podcast the opportunity to not be the target of the show, even though I think that every show starts with me being the target. So
I don't know. Lately, it's kind of like taking a turn. It seemed to be just like putting myself on the chopping block a little bit.
When you put your mind to something, right, you can make it happen. So expectations. I expect that B Wise will have some good commentary for you today.
I'm sure he will.
Right.
I'm sure he will. And I have zero expectations. So whatever. See how it goes.
I don't think that's true either. We'll see what her reaction is when we get there. Right?
That is true. But on a perhaps, stay on the cynical note of things.
Oh, okay. Good way to start. Let's start off on a happy note. Lindsay?
It's just interesting, though. Like the 12-step program. I've never been involved in the 12-step program, but I know people that have, and I have great respect and admiration for it. But I don't really know if this quote originated with that program, but I read it says, "Expectations are premeditated resentments."
Wow.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Wow. Premeditated resentments.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Right. So my thoughts on that were like, okay, that's interesting because, if we do have expectations. And so what are expectations, I guess, first of all?
Sure.
Expectations are.
I think we should probably define some of that. Is a good idea.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me, expectations.
Simple explanation that I have is expectations are our idea of how things should happen or how somebody should behave or how things should unfold.
Okay. So, for instance, if I were to go to a restaurant and there was a menu, let's get crazy and say there's a menu at a restaurant.
Wow.
Right.
You go to a fancy restaurant.
Well, I'm just saying, it's one of those places where you don't have to scan the QR code.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
They bring it to you in a leather bound
Okay.
material. Yeah. So when I look at that and I look at the menu, and sometimes it's like written in like a different font. It's not like the block thing you get at your favorite place, Taco Bell.
Right.
And so, when you look at that and then you say, okay, I'm going to order this thing. Right. And so When I look at it in my mind, I may even have asked the server, like, hey, tell me what you think about this or that. And so in my mind, I've made up this meal that has not arrived. I've never had before, never experienced. And I've made this in my head to be, this is what it's going to be, without knowing anything else but just a description that I wrote. I would say half the time just doesn't meet expectations.
Right.
Which is a funny way to look at it. I said that for you because other people say half the time it exceeds my expectations. But for this conversation, half the time it doesn't.
I mean, sometimes it's better in your imagination, right?
So many things in so many ways. Yes.
Many ways.
Right. But I should also mention, by the way, at the taping of this show, our girl Lindsay, the queen of new media, she is still looking for that special person to make her world go round. Again, you can apply for her hand at igetitmedia@gmail.com. We'll be able to go over that, send your credit reports, asset statements.
Right. Yeah, leave that. That's all we need. Right?
Anyway, so and we'll set our expectations on the words that we read that you send us.
But then we're always disappointed because the reality, reality doesn't match up to the expectations we have.
So this is one of the things Lindsay and I get in this conversation about, and Be Wise can probably chime in on this at some point, is Lindsay uses words like always and never. So Lindsay is always disappointed when she has expectations.
And I asked you last week, you never use those words? And you said, I never do.
No, right, that's right.
So,
that's true story. True story. And so here's the thing. I know that Lindsay has expectations for me. And I believe that I often meet those expectations. Mm-hmm. So I try not to be disappointing. And so in that situation, what would you say about expectations then?
Okay, so I would say this. Right? And maybe we need to like rephrase the quote that I brought up originally from the 12 step. But what if it's more? What if unreasonable expectations are premeditated resentments? Yeah. Because I do think expectations are necessary in order to have a working, healthy relationship and connection with people in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's really the essence of it, right? And part of our conversation today, as we've been bantering about this for a while, is that your expectations need to have a filter. What is that filter that can help you decide whether your expectations are too grand? Maybe they were unreasonable. Maybe they're reasonable, but the people or situations that you're putting those expectations on will never meet. Whatever it is, right? There's all kinds of things. And so maybe there should be a filter. Maybe later we can talk about that filter. What do you think? I
would be very interested to learn more about this
filter. The one
thing
I know about Lindsay is that sometimes she needs a filter.
I do. I do.
And also I might add that Lindsay probably isn't the only one on our show that could use a filter.
Who else? Sean?
Sean can use a filter. Yes. I'm sure that Sean would be one of the top 6 people in the room who would say, I could use a filter on occasion.
Yeah. Well, we all could, right?
And remember, he's in charge of the board. He's in charge of the FCC regulations. So if anybody needed a filter to push the dump button, it would be Sean.
The filter takes place is during the show. It's when before you guys get here and after you leave is when I'm unfiltered.
I see.
That's when the words fly.
That's when it all
the
comes
feelings happen.
Yeah. Sean has a lot to say about us when we're not in the room. And I appreciate that. Yeah. Listen, have a common courtesy to talk behind my back. You know what I'm saying? That is what I like to see. So I wonder if Be Wise has some initial thoughts on this.
Let's hear what he has to say.
Right. Be Wise, come on in and join us from your undisclosed location.
Yeah, undisclosed. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome everybody. It's a happy day. Always. And I get to be on. And you're wise to come to me. I'd like to say that right off the start here. Yeah. Expectations, right? So that's what we're talking about. And I think Lindsay touched on what the definition of that is. And it's a strong belief that something will happen. Strong belief. And so I'd like to say, Lindsay, that you have absolutely met my expectations today. Wow. You're spot on.
Well, thank you.
With my expectations. Jeff, on the other hand, you need to increase a little bit. You've not met my expectation, and I'll bring up something that you said to kind of prove my.
Yeah, so you could use a filter.
Yeah. You said taping of the show, and I'd like to refer to Sean. Is that an accurate statement?
Oh boy.
What happened?
Wrong.
Digital media. Are we taping it?
Yeah. Yes, there is.
Well,
Sean?
he's looking for a rotary dial on his phone right now. So
That's right. Where do I plug the cord in to get this thing to work? I need to ring Clara.
And by the way, Sean, you've exceeded my expectations. The timing of your ding was perfect today. Perfect timing.
You're welcome.
There it is. Yeah, good work. So, children sometimes have a belief that their mind can create things. You know, a little boy can be upset with his brother. He can be angry with him, and just through his thoughts, he feels like something bad can happen to his brother because he has angry thoughts about it. And so if you ask a child that, they really believe that their thoughts can create something. With adults, we learn how to channel that. We can manifest it into an actual action or actual thing that happens to it. We talked in previous episodes about the law of attraction and how the law of attraction can bring someone or something into our life to help us.
Yeah. See, in that, so can you repeat that? Can you repeat that line again? You froze for a second. Good. We don't want to miss it. Tell us again.
So what I was saying is that people can manifest their own creation through the law of attraction. They can bring somebody into their life through their own thoughts. They can bring something into their life to help them manifest the goal that they have, and to do that. So that's a real positive way that our expectations can be met. We expect someone to come into our life to help us create something. But the trap that we have in that is that we pin our happiness to that expectation. And if we fail in accomplishing our goal, then we end up being unhappy. And I just don't want to see Jeff be unhappy anymore.
Right. An unhappy Jeff is not a pretty Jeff. And we like to keep Jeff pretty, if you know what I mean.
I have a question about that manifestation stuff, actually. If I may.
Excellent. Yeah.
Is it that you're manifesting
you're wise to come to me, Sean.
Or is it that you're consciously making yourself aware that when this thing does happen, that you recognize it?
Brilliant. I think that's brilliant. That's absolutely the case. And being able to have those thoughts in a conscious manner can help send your subconscious in the direction of that manifestation. That's brilliant, Sean.
Oh, well, I was going to say, you're not making it happen. You're just recognizing that this thing has happened.
Yes, both.
Okay, cool.
In fact.
Interesting.
Well done.
We'll go back to my coffee.
Sean, I'm sorry about your bagel this morning. I really am. That's tragic.
You know what? Out of the three people here, you're the only one to say that. Thank you.
Sorry.
I apologize for saying "suck it up, Buttercup." That's inappropriate, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Well, I think
you can't mess with a man's bagel.
No. I think BY's made a lot of good points. Thank you.
Did he?
I do, because I think so. Look, I've been in a lot of therapy, so the term that they use
why does that not shock me?
When he was talking about like the boy that has like the ability, he thinks he has the ability to like think certain things and then something happens, right?
Yeah.
Like it's called magical thinking, and we still kind of slip into that sometimes as an adult. We think that we have these expectations with a certain relationship, and this is how it's going to go, and we think that if we think these certain things, that it'll automatically make that other person behave in the manner that we want them to.
Yeah.
And then it just sets us up for disappointment, you know?
Yeah. So I have a friend who makes this statement, and I'm sure that B-Wise will be able to comment on this later, is that he will say to somebody, he'll say, "I reject your reality and substitute my own." Mm-hmm. Right. So it's often we try to correct someone's reality when it really is trying to get our reality to be the one they accept. So why not just be your reality? Right. Back to the mental process of it. So there's a famous quote. It was made famous actually by Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill actually got it from Andrew Carnegie, which I believe Brian went to middle school with.
Right.
Andrew Carnegie back in the day. And the statement is what the mind can achieve and what the man believes, what the mind can conceive and what the man believes he can ultimately achieve, right? And so putting your mind and expectation to things that bring about what you really are created and purposed to do. Instead, we usually put our minds to work on things that we really have no control over.
Right.
And part of that, I think, does come into expectations. I expect people to behave in a certain way. I expect when I go somewhere for service, I expect that I'm going to get this type of service. And when I don't, I blame it on everything and everyone else because that didn't happen. So I think sometimes I have to recognize, am I at, like, I mean, it's easy to pick on food service because that's a very service oriented thing. So if I go to a restaurant that charges $50 a plate, I might have a completely different expectation than if I was going through a drive-through on a dollar menu. But for whatever reason, we have the same expectations often of both.
Right.
Right. And so I think we project our expectations onto others in a way that often isn't fair. But then I also think there are times when we have decided on our expectations because it's built more on a selfish pursuit and not really for a concern about where others are in life as well. So I think there has to be some sort of grace involved in our expectations at times, but then there's also some smartness we have to have with where we put it.
I agree with that. And I think ultimately we can only have expectations with our inner world and how we choose to react to how other people treat us or how other people behave or whether or not the dish is what we thought it was supposed to be or going to be. Ultimately,
we're still talking about food, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm not sure if that's what you call them.
Dish.
In your daily life.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure if that's the way it works for you. I'm not sure.
Dang.
Maybe that's part of the problem.
Gutter
Stop calling
mind.
them dishes, Lindsay.
Whatever. But seriously, like you said, like we have these expectations based on like what we think should happen, but that's our reality. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the other person's reality. So sometimes those expectations we have for other people aren't reasonable.
You know what's crazy about what you think? Like let's say for instance that, cause you're like, what are you, like 32, right? 32 now. So when you were 25, your thought process and the things you thought are completely different than they are today because you've gained experience, you've gained knowledge, you've gained all these other things to give you perspective. And so sometimes that happens, right? Where we think and our expectations are in this place, then we find out later, actually, it was impossible for anybody to reach those expectations or for me to ever be able to accomplish that because of all of these things. Yeah. So maybe that's part of it. I wrote this down, by the way. I thought you would appreciate of all the things. This is what so I wrote this down about expectations today, or actually it's been a couple of days.
Okay.
And it said, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read it. It says, expectations are tricky. Some are necessary, some are unreasonable, while others are just ridiculous. Right. And I think that sums up expectations from everybody. And so the question is, how can we decipher and balance these expectations in such a way as to deliver a mentally healthy reaction and response to them? How do we do that? Right. And I think that our challenge is, and I always say this about battles and fights, most of the time, battles and fights between people or between other things usually don't happen because of an action. Most of the time it's from a reaction. Right. The reaction is where it all, but that's why it's always a famous thing to say, like, the second person to, like, if you were in school, right? The person that hit the person back, they usually are the ones that get caught first, right? And they have to explain this whole thing. They're already on the defensive about, I was just defending myself or whatever. And I think that is a lot of our journeys that we might be able to salvage a lot of our frustrations in life if we control a reaction to things that don't meet our expectations.
I agree with that. Yeah. My mom always tells me, like, people will show you who they are, just believe them, right? So, like, I have a friend that, like, has continually let me down. Like, we've had make plans, and they'll come to town, and we make plans to do things, and then they just, for whatever reason, find an excuse to not follow through on those plans. And I've been super hurt and disappointed in the past. This person's coming to town again this weekend, and yeah,
oh, no.
Tried to coordinate plans,
right.
But then somebody else asked me, like, well, are you going to be disappointed if they don't follow through with those plans? And I'm like, I have zero expectations that they will, right?
Well,
so I think you have to manage your own expectations.
Let me, two things. One is, first of all, I believe Sean has a chaperone that he can send with you. This guy owns a cabin or something.
Oh, yeah, please, thank you.
Would be an option.
That would be great.
No, it's going to be me. I'm coming along. I need something to do on the weekends.
Let's all go.
Sean has nothing to do on the weekends. Anyway, so there's that, right? And then is it wrong to not have any expectations? Should we have some healthy expectations that helps us to formulate our boundaries of what we will or will not.
That's what I was actually going to say is like, it's all about our, thanks a lot, Jeff.
No, nice, right?
No, but it is. It's all
I
about
don't even know why you're here.
No, the person shows us who they are and how they treat us. And we have to I can't change that person. There's nothing I can do to change, make that person change. I can communicate to them clearly, like what I expect in this relationship or friendship, but ultimately it's up to them whether or not they're going to be able to or willing to show up in that way. Yeah. And I can see that instead of taking it personally when they don't or they disappoint me. I can say, okay, I'm going to have these boundaries in this relationship. I'm not going to change my plans because you won't follow through on yours, right? And
I think Sean has a question about this.
I think expectations help to increase the potential emotional outcome of whatever's going to happen. If you're really excited for something, expectation-wise, and it happens, it's even better.
Right.
And then if you're like, and then if it's worse, it's even worse. But if you go in with no expectations, it's like, nah.
How do you know? How do you know what has happened?
Either it's an awesome movie or it's a horrible movie, but the expectations help define that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have no expectations, $7 and a thing of popcorn.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
I don't know. I
that's
tend to think
that would be our code word from now on for the dishes, as we like to call them. We'll call them $7 popcorns.
$7 popcorn.
Right. Because really, if you get a $7 popcorn at the movie, Sean, you didn't get much popcorn.
You better put butter on it.
That's all you're going to get is butter. A little bit of popcorn. Anyway, back to you. Sorry.
Well, here I am on my cynicism again, but I'm going to read this quote.
Okay, here we go. Prepare yourself.
That I read
this is only a setup for Be Wise to tell you where you're going.
Sadness and disappointment in the world is inevitable and a part of life, but there is a difference between feeling pain of things breaking, ending, or drifting apart, and the sharper pain that comes from measuring the inevitable event of life against some ideal of how we imagined things are supposed to be. So life happens, right? Like we're disappointed, things happen, but first thing that comes to my mind is divorce, right? That's hard. That's tricky, sorting through all those emotions. But so you grieve that, but then there's also the grief of what you imagined it was going to be. And it was like this ideal in your mind, right? So that's almost like even more disappointing than what actually happened.
Agreed. I also find that when you're trying to rock around on time, that's also tricky. So so there's that. For you, so I think that it depends on the circumstances, right? So there are some things for us that we've experienced in this genre, so much disappointment that it has skewed our ability to have healthy and proper expectations. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Right. Because in other areas of your life, you're like, I don't mind having high expectations. It's awesome, right? I can't wait. And, if it doesn't quite get there, I'm okay. But then in other areas where we have been significantly traumatized or really have been let down so hard that we go, I'm not doing it.
And that's where our expectations come from, right? Our past experiences, our inner feelings. And so that's why it's so essential to communicate with the person or people that we're in connection or relationship with. What do we expect out of this relationship? Because I might have a different idea of how a friendship should be in a give and take situation. So I think it's essential that we...
I do. I think that so this kind of brings up the thought for me in this kind of aha moment, right, that we try to have on every show. And I think this is going to be a great experience to be able to have more bantering about this on our social media and in our YouTube channels. But I think that you have to have that filter we referenced, right? And so when it comes to the expectation filter, I think what is helpful is to change the expectations to a word I made up. This is a free word for you, Lindsay. So feel free to take this and run with it. Inspectations, right? How do we inspect where our thought process coming from, where our traumas are coming from, what is the basis of our expectation, and what is the reality of where we're looking for that expectation to be placed on, and really inspecting that to limit our reactions that are negative and finding ways to approach expectations in a more healthy response means that we have to really inspect where we're placing our expectations. Not to say, I don't want to have expectations of you because I know you're going to fail, but I don't want to have expectations that are unreasonable that neither one of us can reach and achieve. Because if we set expectations for each other that we can actually reach and achieve and build on, it builds momentum, it builds connection, it builds greater opportunities for growth that helps us all achieve. Right. And so I think that inspectations is a helpful journey. What do you think?
Okay, I like it, but help me understand it a little bit more,
Right. Well,
please.
I can certainly try. I see the expectations are a little too high for me now.
No. So expectation, that's just like what we've talked about in previous podcasts, right? Like just our self-awareness, going inside ourselves and understanding, why do I expect this, or why am I disappointed when this person doesn't come through this way? And then being able to manage our expectations in a more reasonable way.
So when you, I think a good example would be, and maybe we can bring Brian be wise on this as well. So here's the thing. When your expectations are not met, you are disappointed. I'm guessing that most people, a vast majority of the time, blame the other thing or person or party for that disappointment. Would that be accurate?
Sure.
And so I need to look at my expectation as maybe it was my failure, not the other person or other situation's failure. Maybe it was my failure because I set expectations for whatever reason. It could be for very unhealthy reasons I set that expectation. But I have to inspect that, right? What do you think, Brian? Get his walk-up music.
Yeah, I love it. I love the walk-up music. So I think this is a really good avenue that we've kind of journeyed towards there, Jeff. I think you're touching on something. And I think that the definition of the expectation can really be broken into two categories. One is the expectation of a thing, and the other is the expectation of a person. And I think that it's much easier to get over the disappointment that the movie was no good when you expected it to be better. But when you expect a certain behavior or an action from a person, it's much more difficult to get over that. And it's very disappointing when people don't live up to the expectation that you have of them. So, in this day and age, in our world that we live in today, people get so butthurt over everything, and we're losing friendships because they expect us to have the same beliefs that they have. And when we don't have those beliefs or opinions, then their expectation of us is that they're just going to go ahead and cancel us because we don't mean anything to them. We've not met their expectation. And that's true in parenting too. When you have a child and you go visit friends, and that child, you expect them to know the house rules. You expect them to know what they're supposed to live to. And when they fail in that, then they get in trouble for something they didn't even know. And so it's hard in that realm to kind of have to channel your expectation. One way to get out of that is to clearly define what those rules are before you go into it. And what my clearly defined expectation is, you two will both solve this whole issue. That's what I'm.
Yeah. Okay, Switzerland. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's great. So, Lindsay, in this situation, then, so all you have to do is when you are, if I'm hearing Be Wise correctly, is to properly communicate what your expectations are to the other person in order to set a baseline for what's possible. And that gives the opportunity for the other person to say, real quick, I'm not going to meet that expectation. And you're hoping that they are actually being truthful, because I think, especially when, in your situation with the dating thing, don't forget to email us at igetitmedia@gmail.com with your application, that I think that it's hard to have that conversation with somebody that you've just met or perhaps early on, because sometimes we say things to each other in the beginning dating stages that is about trying to build towards something else. But I think that we have to, if someone doesn't know what the expectations are for them, it's hard for them to actually meet those or actually make you feel the way that you need to feel in those situations. Is that part of it, Brian, that we're talking about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, we all fall into three different categories. We're either a visual type person or an auditory type person or kinesthetic, where we're huggy, feely, and our feelings. And if we're expecting someone to be auditory in their feelings towards us and they're visual or kinesthetic, then we feel like they've missed the boat. They're not meeting my expectation or our expectation of how I want to be loved by that person or how I want to interact with that person. So absolutely, Jeff, I think ding, ding, you've exceeded my expectation.
I agree with that. It was about communication, but some people really aren't able to meet those expectations. Some people aren't like the touchy-feely type, if that's like our love language or whatever it might be. And we either we have to pivot. We either have to accept that and continue that relationship with that person, knowing that that particular need of ours won't be met, or decide if that's like going to be unfulfilling for us. I think it's a balance between something that you mentioned earlier, having grace for somebody and where they're at in their life and what we're actually able to expect from them in our relationships.
Yeah.
And also going within ourselves and like being aware of like, am I okay with this? Am I okay with being in this relationship, whatever it might be, knowing that this particular need cannot be met, that I cannot expect that from this person.
So, Be Wise, maybe this is a good question for you in that when it comes to expectations, how does one try to inspect or decipher what is appropriate expectations for the other party or thing that we're dealing with in our lives? What is that thing we can trigger us to be inspecting?
Yeah. I mean, expectations is a big thing in our lives. And I think it's healthy to have expectations of people. I think it's unhealthy to maybe have too high of expectations. So how do you define that? And that is, I think it's just what makes you happy and how you can create a visualization or a reality that meets that expectation. And then communication with that person to say, listen, what you're doing isn't making me happy. What we can do together to make us both happy. And it goes the other way. What can I do to help you feel in that way? What can I do?
So hearing that, here's what I'm hearing then. Your expectations should be coming from your identity, what you identify as internally,
That's
mentally.
Certainly one qualifier for sure.
No. What do you think about that, Lindsay?
I think that's part of it. I also think we have to be aware of like realism. Like, is this realistic to expect this person to, meet my standards? And if it's not, then accept that and not continue in that relationship hoping that things will change or pushing that person to someday magically evolve into meeting all your expectations. Like, if they can't, they can't. If they won't, they won't. Like, and just let it be, because we can't change it. Like you've said, all we can do is go inside of ourselves and how are we going to react? How are we going to respond? What kind of boundaries are we going to establish in that relationship? Okay,
so in wrapping this up for today's show, what I have been told many, many times, and which I find to be hard to disprove, and this has to do with expectations, is that every failed or failing relationship, no matter what it is, personal, intimate, business, friendship, whatever it is, any relationship fails or is failing for one reason and one reason only, and that's unmet expectations. Unmet expectations lead to all the other things. Some people say communication, they'll say all these other things, right? But it really comes down to, you didn't meet my expectations, so I don't want to be in relationship with you. That's what you're saying. And when you are moving along, that's what you're saying. You are not meeting my expectations. Doesn't mean your expectations are wrong. It just means that for me, you aren't meeting my expectations, which is how I feel connected. How I feel who I am is when my expectations are met. So I have to inspect my expectations to make sure that they are proper and appropriate, right? And match my identity to that. And then reaching into people and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. I want to meet your expectations. Do you want to meet mine? We have to be healthy together.
And it's personal. Like, we're the only ones that know what standard of expectations we need from other people to, like Brian said, be happy or have that fulfillment in our lives. And it doesn't mean that person's bad or wrong if they're not able to meet that expectation. We can still love them, but just understand that the relationship is not able to fulfill us the way we need it to, and be able to accept that and have those boundaries or those disconnections or whatever you need to find that fulfillment and happiness.
Absolutely. So I'm excited about debating this further with Lindsay. I think there are so many areas with which to drill down and help each other to grow and to find places in our lives where maybe our expectations are really the cause of some of our mental traumas. and other places where expectations can be better materialized into having more healthy relationships with people and things. So having that filter, like I said, I like to call it the expectation filter, and I call it inspectations. And I think if you can start having inspectations, instead of having understanding, having understanding, and then having those inspectations will help me to have a better expectation for myself, which would then the expectation of the others around me.
Inspectations and
understandings. Yeah.
I'm going to use it. I like that.
Yeah, those are free.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Check us out on our social media at the I Get It Show. We'd appreciate all your feedback, and thank you so much for listening. Thanks, Brian.
Well done, Be Wise.
Thanks,
well done, Sean. Lindsay, as always, the queen of new media. Well done.
Thanks, Jack.
You've been listening to The I Get It Show. Witty and insightful conversations about nothing, discussing how our daily lives are influenced by everything. Feel free to reach out. The I Get It Show at gmail.com. Like and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, this has been The I Get It Show. This has been a production from a podcast studio.